in few seconds, we're going to start live.
Perfect. I'm ready to go and looking forward to it very much.
I'm just checking if the live is working. Okay. So, well, here we are. I'm controlling the chat as well. So, well, David, welcome to our webinar. Welcome to our digital coffee of LaSalle. Thank you very much for being here. It's an honor having you here speaking with us. So I always say the same. So I am very bad introducing people. So I will kindly request you to briefly introduce yourself because your nickname is Dr. Risk, something that for me is very, very interesting in the current situation that we are living right now. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. And okay, the floor is yours, David.
Well, it's a great pleasure to be here, Luis. Thank you very much for the invitation. And I've been to LaSalle in Barcelona 3 or 4 times, and the city is beautiful, and I always enjoy my visits to the university because of the opportunity to share with some people who are really interested and engaged in their subjects and passionate about their subject. And for me, the one thing that I'm most passionate about is risk management, because for me, risk management is the most important thing in life, the most important thing in business, the most important thing we can do. And so I took my professional name, the Risk Doctor, I guess about 20 years ago. I've been involved in risk management for 35 years, from 1985, when I was very young, of course. I'm still engaged in risk management because it's interesting, because it works, but also because it's constantly changing and developing. And so my role has been as a thought leader, having new ideas about risk management, but also as a practitioner. So trying to have new ideas, but making sure that they work in practice, not just kind of academic theories. And so my motto is to understand deeply so you can explain simply. And so what I'm trying to do is to take some of these deep concepts about risk management and actually make them useful to people. And now that I'm actually older than I look, well, I hope I'm older than I look. I just reached 65 a couple of weeks ago. And so at this end of my career, what I'm seeking to do is to build my legacy through speaking and writing, videos, articles, books, and so on, and to make my ideas available to other people to take away and use them, and to build on things that I've developed in my career.
Excellent. So, well, really happy you are here. And well, David, so why is so important risk management? So why do you think it is more a core competency than a profession? So all of us, we need risk management.
Absolutely. It is the most important thing you can do. Let me explain. The first principle is that risk management makes the difference between success and failure. Because we all plan to succeed. We set out our goals and our objectives, and we make a plan to reach our goals. And then we start on the plan to achieve the things that we set out to achieve. But we all know in life and in projects and in business that things never turn out exactly as we planned. And as we are underway in our project or in our business enterprise or in our lives, things happen that we weren't expecting. And they're things which drive us off course, which make it harder for us to achieve our goals, or which distract us and pull us in a different direction. And if we could only see those things in advance and be prepared for them and be ready to either avoid them or to control them or to go around them, then it would be easier for us to achieve our goals. And those things that we weren't ready for, the things that we hadn't foreseen, the things that weren't in our plan, which affect us achieving our goal, well, those things are risks. And so risk management, the way I explain it is that it provides a radar, a forward-looking radar that scans the future. And it says, as I'm heading in this direction to go to my goal, what are the things that are out there coming towards me that could affect me? And how can I steer my project or my business or my life in order to avoid the bad things and steer towards the good things? And so my ability to see those things coming and to manage them in advance, or to manage myself in advance in order to avoid the bad things and capture the good things, will make it easier for me to achieve my goals. So risk management, my ability to manage those unexpected, unforeseen things that weren't in the plan, if I can't manage them, I won't get to my plan. I won't get to my objectives. But if I can manage them, then I have a better chance of achieving what I want to achieve. So my ability to manage risk is the difference between success and failure.
That's great. So, by the way, people that is connected right now, you have the opportunity to ask questions to David, to Dr. Risk. So you can use the chat, which is here. So even people which is online in YouTube, I am controlling the YouTube channel right now. So if you are asking questions, Dr. Risk is going to answer. So you have a tremendous opportunity right now. You can miss it. So then even if you want to ask questions in Spanish, don't worry, I'm going to translate it. So
thank you.
Then, David, so we are going to live probably the biggest crisis in the last 150 years. So, any advice? So, what do you think is the current situation? I know that you published a really interesting video a few weeks ago or 1 week ago talking about that.
Well, I think when we're talking in this situation about risk management, especially in a university and with people following different degrees in engineering and management and marketing and so on, it's very easy to see risk management as a business competence. It's something that we have to know how to do in order to have successful projects and programs, to have a successful marketing program or a product launch, to be good managers and make effective decisions. So we all understand that all of those things are risky, and we need to identify and manage our risks in order to achieve those goals. But of course, goals and objectives are not just limited to projects and business and marketing and human resources and all of those other things. Of course, we have goals there, but we also have goals at every other level of our existence. And I have personal goals to be happy and healthy and wealthy and wise, we say in English. And those are goals which could be affected by uncertainty. And so if I could identify and manage the uncertainties that could affect my personal goals, then I will be personally more successful. We could think about society. Society has goals in order to support the weak, in order to provide the resources and the services that people need in order to function effectively as a society, to provide community engagement and so on. And each of those things is affected by uncertainties that could make it harder or easier for us to achieve our goals. And then nations have goals as well in terms of national security, or in terms of our reputation and our position in the world, our ability to trade. All of these things are objectives which are also affected by uncertainty. So I think one of my key messages is that risk management is a life skill. It's not just a business competence. And it affects everything from bringing up children to planning my pension, to managing my career personally, but also at the societal and the national level. It's applicable to understand what those things are that could affect us. So now you mentioned that the current coronavirus pandemic, which is certainly the greatest crisis for the last 100 years, unless perhaps we count the Second World War, which obviously had a bigger effect. More people died, more nations involved. But certainly we have the potential of something really serious here. And we haven't seen a flu or at least a coronavirus pandemic like this for just over 100 years, since 1918. Which very sadly was called the Spanish flu. Did you know that in 1918? I don't know if it was your fault that you infected the whole world.
Not really Spanish, but we know that.
I'm very sorry. That's just what people call it. I know it didn't start.
Yeah, we know that. Yes. And we always say the Spanish flu was not the Spanish, but okay, we agree.
And we could say the same, that the Chinese COVID-19 is not Chinese. It's a global problem. But the question is whether the coronavirus pandemic is a risk. And I would say, from my position as a risk specialist, the coronavirus pandemic as we have it now is not a risk. Because risk has two characteristics. Risk is always uncertain, and risk always affects objectives. Now, clearly the coronavirus pandemic affects our objectives, both personal in terms of my career and my health, in terms of social things to do with my family interactions, how I engage with my community, society, national, right across the whole spectrum of the way we live. The coronavirus matters. It affects our objectives. But it's not an uncertainty. We have the coronavirus pandemic here present with us now. And so it's not something which is in itself uncertain. It's not an uncertainty that matters, which is the way that I define risk, uncertainty that matters, but it's a certainty that matters. And in business terms, we use different labels for these kinds of things. An uncertainty that matters is a risk, but a certainty that matters is an issue or a problem. And so it's absolutely true that the coronavirus pandemic is an issue. It's a current issue, it's a current problem, but it's not a risk. So does that mean that risk management has nothing to say, nothing to offer in this situation of the coronavirus pandemic? Well, that's not true. As you'll perhaps expect as the risk doctor, I would say risk management can help us with everything, including how we approach this particular pandemic. And so if the coronavirus pandemic is not a risk, it is actually a cause of risk. So because we have this particular situation right across the world, that introduces uncertainties which need to be identified and managed, uncertainties that could affect the future. And if we identify and manage those uncertainties effectively now, then our future will be better and we will be able to achieve our future goals. So what I'm suggesting in terms of the pandemic is that we accept the pandemic is where it is. We need crisis management, disaster recovery, problem management, issue management, all of those things that we're currently doing. But in addition, we need to get our risk radar working. And we need to scan the future and say, because of the coronavirus, what uncertainties are out there coming towards me as an individual, coming towards me as us as a family, us as a society or community, and us as a nation. And what uncertainties as a result of that problem of the coronavirus pandemic can we identify and manage proactively in order to avoid bad things and capture good things? So personally, there is a risk that I catch the virus, and there's a risk that I might be very sick or even die. And so I have to manage that in terms of the way I behave outside in public, whether I wear a mask, whether I wash my hands, I wear gloves, the places that I go and so on. And I'm managing my exposure to that risk to make sure that I don't get sick and I don't die. The same is true of my family. My wife is here, she's unwell, she's vulnerable, and so I have to protect her. And there's a risk that she gets the virus and is very unwell, and the same for my family. So you can see there are potential bad things that could happen, which are uncertainties I need to manage, and we're all learning how to do that. And things to do with our careers, with our jobs. If you're a business owner, maybe your business will have to start up in a very different way. One of the very interesting things about risk, though, Luis, is that not all risk is bad. And you might have come across this idea. It's certainly a very strong focus in my professional work to say that if risk is uncertainty that matters, some uncertainties matter because if they happen, they're very bad and we need to minimize or avoid them. But some uncertainties matter because if they happen, they will be very good. They would help us to save time or save money or be more effective, deliver further value or benefits. And those things need to be managed as well. So in my professional work, I talk about risk having two varieties or two flavors. Bad risks are threats, good risks are opportunities. And they're both uncertainties that matter. They both can be identified and managed in the same way because they're both risks. So risk management minimizes threats, maximizes opportunities, destroys threats, captures opportunities. The thing is the same. It's just that the sign of the impact differs. And so with that principle, we can apply that also to the coronavirus pandemic. So sure, there are some bad things that could happen to me personally. As a result of the pandemic, I could get sick or die. But there are some good things too. So I can discover new ways of relating to my family or to my society. There are all sorts of different ways that people are expressing community feeling, gratitude, serving one another, caring for the elderly. There's all sorts of things that are going on which are really good. And the question is, are we going to keep those? So when we come out of this crisis, we don't want to go back to what we had before. We want to go forward to something better. And so, of course, we need to stop the bad things happening, but we also need to identify the good things that might happen. For me personally, for us as a community, for us as a society or as a nation. New ways of doing business, new supply chains, new ways of meeting, not having to travel so much, new ways of working from home and reducing our carbon footprint and reducing our overhead costs in the business, new ways of running projects through using remote technology, sensors instead of having people there, use of robots. There's all sorts of things that could be really good for us that could come out of this bad situation of the coronavirus pandemic, and ways of nations working together and cooperating and collaborating instead of competing. I think, we could see a much better world at the end of the coronavirus pandemic if we identify the uncertainties that could help us and grab them and make them happen, and if we see the uncertainties that could hurt us and avoid them. If we go through the pandemic with our eyes closed and just hope that everything will be the same when we come out, well, it's not going to be a very nice situation.
That's great. So you have 6-7 questions in line. So
good.
Okay, that's good. So first one, Victor Espinosa says, to be a good risk manager, what do you need as a professional?
Okay, so I think there are three things you need to understand to be a good professional risk manager. One is you need to understand people. One is you need to understand process. And the other is that you need to understand risk. So people are the most important thing in all of life, but also in projects and in business and in management and in everything that we do professionally. And so people identify risk, people assess risk, and people manage risk. And all of these things are driven by our perception, by the way that we see the world, by the way that we think about the world, by the way that we process the information that we have. And it's really important that we don't rely only on processes and technology to identify and manage risk. We need to be aware of the way that people work, the way that people see uncertainty and react to it from their guts, as well as from their heads. So we need to understand that whole sort of human dimension. We also need to understand process. So the way that risk management works, I explain it in terms of 6 questions. So there are 6 simple questions we have to answer in order to manage risk. What am I trying to achieve? What might affect me? Which are the big ones? What shall I do about it? Did that work? And what's changed? And each of those questions is part of the risk management process. So what am I trying to achieve is objective setting. What might affect me? That's risk identification. Which are the big ones? That's risk evaluation and prioritizing. What can I do about it? That's risk response planning. Did it work? That's a risk review. And then what's changed? And that's a risk update. And so just asking those questions, we need to understand how the process works to be a good risk manager. And then lastly, we do need to understand the nature of risk. Risk is not the same as problems and issues as we've talked about just a moment ago. Risk is dynamic, risk is changing, risk is ambiguous, risk is complex, risk is connected. All of these things are important characteristics of risk. And so I think one of the other key characteristics that a risk manager needs to have is to be curious, to be inquisitive, to be asking the next question. So I see this. Why is that? What made that happen? If we did this, what would happen then? Why do we always do this and not that? And to be asking questions and exposing and uncovering where the uncertainties are, which are often hidden under the surface.
Excellent. Really good one. So we have another question from Elizabeth Duocastella. Coronavirus is the current major known risk, and each country has been managed in a different way, which is risk element from your book. Which risk elements from your book have you seen? Risk blindness, risk anorexia, risk paralysis, risk amnesia. So how many risks have you seen?
Elisabetta, that's great. I see you've been reading my books. Very good. Thank you. Different countries are managing the coronavirus pandemic in different ways. That's true. And I said a moment ago that one of the important things that a risk professional needs to do is understand people. And people are individuals, but people are also groups. So we have individuals, teams, divisions, organizations, societies, and nations. And all of these different levels of people have their own way of operating, their way of being. We call it culture. So you can have a team culture, a departmental culture, organizational culture, and a national culture. And the culture shapes the way that we see the world. It's our worldview, it's our way of thinking. And different cultures have different ways of understanding and responding to uncertainty. So some cultures embrace it and they say, this is wonderful. You know, uncertainty unlocks the way that we operate in the world. If everything was certain, then we can't do anything. But uncertainty is something we can engage with, we can play with, we can experiment with. It's wonderful. If life was uncertain, it would be boring. Other cultures say, oh, uncertainty is dangerous. We don't like uncertainty. We'd rather control things. We'd rather have rules and regulations and understand how we respond in each situation. And everything is more defined. And so different cultures, and there's everything in between, of course. And that will, how we view authority, how we view the government's role. Does the government have to tell us what to do and solve all our problems? And there's a top-down view, a hierarchy of power in our country? Or are things more level, that it's the people who decide and who instruct their governments on how to operate? And so some of the countries that have been very different have had different cultures. And we might pick China, where things started, and we've seen as a very authoritarian culture where things are very hierarchical and directed from the top, where they closed a province. Then we might look at Sweden, which is a very equal culture, where things have been left very much more to individuals to decide how to respond, and then everything in between. And so I think the way that governments have responded is very much driven by the national culture. And so some are what we might call risk averse and say, we don't want any uncertainty. The best way to do that is to define everything very precisely. Others are more risk seeking to say, well, let's wait and see how things work out. And we'll develop our response as we see the pandemic developing. And others are what I call risk anorexic, that they are just shedding risk as far as possible. And in fact, not taking enough risk, that they've tied everything down so tightly that people don't have any freedom at all to do what they want to do or what they need to do. And some of the way that in Spain you have responded with perhaps the tightest lockdown anywhere in the world might be part of that. So say, just no risk of exposure. You can't leave the house. You can't leave the apartment. That is very strongly risk averse. And then others, have a different view. So I think each of the different varieties of risk culture, you can see them if you look around the world. And there really is no right or wrong. These are just different approaches to the world. They all work in good ways and they have their bad points as well. And of course, us as citizens, we are used to living within our own national culture. So we tend to see the way that we do things as the right way. And we look at Russia and we look at Sweden and we look at Singapore and we look at Australia and New Zealand and we say, well, we wouldn't do it that way. because we're blind to our own worldview. It is obvious to us to do things the way we do it. But I think one of the things we're learning about through this pandemic is to look over the fence and say, oh, that's interesting. I wonder how they did that. And maybe we will learn something from other cultures in a new way. It's a great question, Elisabetta. Thank you.
Great. You have more questions, David. So Elena Mayans Marquez, is there any standard method or summary ideas to follow when we start a project in order to manage the risk? So do you have, I'm sure you have any standard methodology or summary of ideas to follow before starting a project to manage the risk?
Okay, very good. Obviously, there are project management professional organizations like the Project Management Institute or the International Project Management Association, IPMA. They have their own ways of doing things. There's the Prince methodology and so on. I have a methodology. Oh, I happen to have on my shelf Practical Project Risk Management, the ATOM methodology. An opportunity to advertise my book.
No. Go ahead. Show it a little bit more.
Oh, well, I'm not really about advertising books, but so this book here, you can see it won an award from PMI as the best project management book a few years ago. But this is a methodology for managing risk, active threat and opportunity management. So it deals with upside as well as downside risks. But what this has at the beginning, and the question I think was specifically about how we initiate a project and deal with the risk early on. In that methodology, it starts with a sizing step to say the level of the risk management process that you apply needs to be driven by how risky the project is. So if we have a very risky project, then we might want to have a more detailed, intense risk process. Whereas if we have a more routine project or a smaller project, maybe we have a lighter process. And so the ATOM methodology has a step where we filter the projects very quickly through a standard kind of risk sieve, if you like, a risk measure, to say it's either a big, complex, risky project and we apply a heavy risk process, it's a small, light, easy project and we apply a light risk process, or it's a typical kind of project for us and we apply a standard risk process. So there is a methodology for project sizing or screening projects to see how risky they are before we start the project, and then determining the level of risk process to match the level of the risk challenge. So I worked with NASA some years ago on the project to go to Mars and come back, and particularly on the stage of building a base station on the moon. And it was a very interesting program to be part of. But we had about 300 risk engineers who were full-time on the project, who were all using every form of analysis you could imagine to think about the different technical risks and financial risks and health and safety risks. And so we had one level of process that was really, really heavy because of the type of project we were involved in, or program actually. And then I've been involved in some very small informal projects. For example, my daughter's wedding, I mentioned last time I was in Barcelona. It's a project. It has objectives, it has a timeline, it has a budget, but it's not formal. And we had a little risk process on my daughter's wedding to think about the things that could go wrong, the things that could go well, and how we were going to address them. And we just did it in conversation with the family. There was no formal process. So the level of process from NASA to the family wedding was very, very different, but the steps were the same. So I would say we do need to understand the riskiness of the project before we start it, so that we can then understand how to apply risk management into the project.
Excellent. So Daniel has another question. Managing risk is also including managing fear, right? In that case, how is the best way to manage your own fear, but also the fear of the fears of your team?
Okay, excellent question. And I think that's a very insightful question to understand that what's happening in here, actually lower down in your gut, really does drive the way that you behave towards risk. And we see it with the coronavirus pandemic. Some people are wearing masks and gloves and hiding away, and others are just going out, and they're actually being stupid and unwise. Yeah. So that's to do with how you respond to uncertainty. And there are different risk attitudes, which we've already mentioned. But the question is, how do you manage your fear and the fear of other people? And this is where the area of emotional intelligence comes to play. I actually call it emotional literacy, because emotional literacy, being literate, means you know how to use your competence, not just that you have it. So some people are very intelligent, but they don't know how to use their intelligence. So emotional literacy is about understanding myself and others. And I have a so what's sixes? This is interesting. I have a 6-step process for applied emotional literacy, which we can apply to ourselves and to other people. And I call this process the 6 A's, because each step in English starts with an A. So thinking about myself first, awareness, what's going on? How fearful am I? Am I petrified, absolutely paralyzed by fear, or just a little bit anxious? Being aware. The second is appreciation. Where did that come from? Why am I feeling like this? Is it because I've experienced this before? Is it because of something my parents taught me? Is it that this is the culture environment that I'm in? Why am I feeling this feeling? So awareness and appreciation. And then the next step is assessment. Is this okay? So I'm feeling this and I understand why. Is this helping me or hindering me from achieving my goals? Sometimes the way I'm feeling is okay. It's an appropriate feeling. If I'm, somebody is running towards me with a knife and screaming, and I'm afraid, that's the right reaction and I should run away. If somebody is running towards me and saying, help, help, and I feel afraid, the right thing to do is to stop and wait and see what they need. So you have to assess the situation, awareness and appreciation, then assessment. And I'm doing this for my internal, how I'm feeling, okay? What do I feel, why, and is it okay? If it is okay, then I accept it. I say, okay, this is the way I feel. I understand it. I'm going to go with it. That's the 4th A. If it's not okay, I need to make a change. And making a change has 2 steps to it. There's assertion, saying, right now I understand, I've got to make a change. I'm going to do it. It's a choice, a question of your will. You assert the need for change, then you take action to make the change. And so with the 6 A's, you, first of all, in here, I look in here and I say, what's going on and why? Awareness and appreciation. Is it okay? Assessment. Accept it if it is okay, and assert the need for change and take action if it's not. That's applied emotional literacy. And I can do exactly the same for other people. So I look at my team in a project and we've just discovered a whole new set of requirements and the customer has shortened the timescale and cut half the budget. And so we say, okay, guys, how are we feeling about this? Are we afraid? Are we challenged and excited? And why are we feeling that? And is it okay? So awareness, appreciation, and assessment. And then if it's okay, we run with it. And if it's not okay, we change it. So I think the whole idea of applied emotional literacy or emotional intelligence can help us manage our own fear or any other feeling inside us, and also that of other people. So it's a great question. Of course, behind each of those 6 A's, there are methods and techniques and theories and so on. But the basic process is very simple. You could do that.
I do love the concept of emotional literacy. I was writing down. So Great. So we have another question from Andrea. How can you manage risks in front of your staff and don't seem a pessimistic boss?
Yes, or weak. That's the other thing. Oh, I don't know. It's all uncertain. Okay, this is how you view risk. If you see risk management as a sign of weakness or a sign of incompetence or a sign of pessimism, then that's true. People will say, we don't want any risk here. We're professionals. We have a saying in England, we say, no sex, please, we're British. British people don't do sex. Did you know that? That's not true. It's not true, by the way, because if it was true, there wouldn't be any British people. But some people say, no risk, please, we're professionals. So we can't have risk, because we know what we're doing. It's not true. Every project, every business, every aspect of life involves risk. And so we have to recognize that risk is natural. Risk is part of being in business. It's part of running projects, and we have to deal with it professionally. So that's the first thing, is to understand what risk is. And so when we talk about risk in front of our team, we are just being professional. We're recognizing the reality and we're saying we need to deal with it. But the other thing about pessimism is to recognize this idea that some risks are bad, but other risks are good. So when we're talking about the uncertainties that could affect us, of course, professionally, we have to find the things that could go wrong and stop them going wrong, or make them smaller, or control them, or prepare for them. Of course we do. But we also have to look for the ways of working faster, smarter, cheaper, of saving time, saving money, being more effective, delivering more value and benefits. And so when I do a risk workshop with my project team, I say, look, guys, we're looking for any uncertainty, the things that could hurt us and the things that could help us. And we're going to get rid of those bad things. That's good. It's really helpful to remove and minimize the bad things. It'll make your life easier. But we're also going to be looking for opportunities to do better, opportunities that will help us achieve our goals and chase after those. And either way, removing the obstacles and capturing the things that help us is going to make our lives easier, make our projects more successful. Now, what's pessimistic about that? That is the most optimistic, positive view of uncertainty you can have. So even by saying there are bad things out there in our project, if you follow it by saying, and we can deal with them, and remove them and minimize them, that's not pessimistic at all.
No.
That's really helpful, and people should see that. So it's a question of culture, but it's also a question of education, of explaining to people what risk management is trying to do. It's trying to remove the obstacles, make it easier for us to achieve our goals. And that's absolutely not pessimistic. Risk management's fun. I mean, that's why I'm doing it. If I was, oh dear, going to work and got to manage risk all the time, I would have given up years ago. It's because risk management is exciting and it's helpful. That's why we do it.
And it's positive. So the way that the last question was great, but your answer was amazing. So
well, it's positive. Removing the negative things is positive, and creating more positive things is more positive. It's all positive. Why wouldn't you do it?
That's perfect. By the way, Danielle and Andrea say thanks, David. Thanks a lot.
Good, it's a pleasure.
Okay, here we have another question. So, unknown person. Thanks for sharing your knowledge. One question. What will you say to the CEO of an important company that prefer, very Spanish, improvisation instead of good risk management? That's very, very, very Spanish.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things we have to think about is risk appetite. How much risk are you prepared to take in order to achieve your goals? And if we have very simple goals, very low goals, we don't need to take much risk. If my goal for today is to get up, wash, and go for a walk, actually, that's easy. It doesn't require too much taking risk. Actually, for somebody else who is disabled, who perhaps has physical problems, getting up, getting washed and going for a walk could be a really big challenge and could involve taking quite a lot of risk, which is a different issue. But the way that the amount of risk we need to take is driven by the objectives that we want to achieve. So sometimes if we want to achieve really challenging goals, we really want to innovate, we want to break into a new market, we want to develop new products, we want to change the way that people think and live, and we have big goals, we have to take big risks to achieve it. And sometimes we have to improvise. The only thing I would say, well, first of all, is that appropriate? Are we really applying the level of risk taking to the level of risk challenge? But the other thing which is really important is to do it with our eyes open. If your CEO wants to improvise and take lots of risk, they need to understand the implications of that. If we take lots of risk, we could create something fabulous. We could really change the world. We could become the world's leading providers of a new service that nobody's ever thought of. We could really transform the lives of millions of people. Or we could crash the company, go out of business. You could lose all your money, lose all your house, and thousands of people could be out of work. Now, if you're prepared to take that risk with your eyes open, then let's go for it. And then you need to put good risk management behind that to say, we're going for a big goal, like the Gates Foundation. We're going to eliminate malaria. Really? How are you going to do that? Well, it's going to take lots of money. lots of innovation, lots of new ideas, lots of people. If it doesn't work, people are going to die. Right. Okay. Now we know what's at stake. Now we can actually, we can move forward with our eyes open. So I would say to the CEO who has that attitude, first, is it worth it? And second, can you bear it? If it went wrong, is that appropriate? And if not, what risk management measures are you putting in place? So you can be improvising and innovative and manage risk. And I would say it's both and, not either or.
Great. So we have another good one from Thomas Walter. What is the right balance between consider all the risks thoroughly, but not fall in the paralysis by analysis?
Yes. That's difficult. First of all, you will never consider all the risks. You have to understand there are some risks which cannot be known today, which could be known tomorrow or next week or next year. And there's a number of reasons for that. One is that some risks are time-based. So when we're in the design phase of our project, there are some things that we would never know until we reached implementation. So some risks are time-based and we can't know them now. Some risks are dependent on our decisions today. So if we make design choices now, that introduces implementation risks that weren't there until we made this choice. So there are risks that emerge later with time, that emerge later with choice or decisions. And there are risks that emerge later as a result of other people's decisions and actions. So a subcontractor could decide to double their prices or to go out of business, which we wouldn't know until it happened. And it's not within our control. And then lastly, there are the unknown risks, the risks that emerge as a surprise to everybody. So we can never know all risks. We can know all knowable risks. And that's the challenge. As long as we know everything we could know, that's the first thing. So analysis paralysis. This is a very difficult question. How do you define where the right level is? Analysis needs to lead to action. The point of analysis is to take action. So analysis is to say, I know something that I didn't know before that I need to know. Or now I can do something that I wasn't going to do before, but I need to do. And so action is the outcome of analysis. Once you have enough analysis to know what to do, you should stop analyzing and start doing. But where that line is, there's no single right place. Sometimes, just a simple analysis, oh, this is obvious, we have to do this. Sometimes you have to go deeper and deeper and deeper, and it's complex, and then it becomes clear, and you say, now we know. And sometimes you can analyze forever and still never know. So it's not possible to answer.
No, it's very difficult. So it's very difficult to find the trigger that triggers action.
Well, the trigger is action, is when you have enough information to take action, then do it. Then stop analyzing and get going. And then, of course, what you should always do is review back and say, well, did our action work? Do we need better analysis? And then we might go back and reanalyze and take different action. But stop when you've got enough to take action.
Okay, excellent. By the way, Elizabeth says something that I support 100% is having so much fun.
Yes,
Thank you,
yes,
David.
exactly. Life without risk is so boring.
Thank you, David. So we have two more questions. So Jose Manuel Garcia, do you think the globalization will change in the production system in the future? Production systems in the future?
This is not a risk question, really. This is a kind of strategy question.
Mm-hmm.
So I can give a personal opinion, and I think, yes, I think they have to change because the way we are currently is not sustainable. So sustainability risk is a fairly new area. Obviously, we've had environmental risk and so on. But in the broader sense of sustainability, the five capitals, I don't know if you're familiar with that, so human capital, natural capital, material capital, and so on. All of these things need to be sustainable. And currently we're not. So I think in terms of the way that we're using the world's resources, it's not equitable. I do a lot of work in sub-Saharan Africa with poor communities, and we are so rich without understanding it, where lots of people in the world have very little or not enough. And so we have to change the way the world is balanced. And I think the coronavirus pandemic is something of a leveler, although it does affect more countries like Spain, Italy, UK, France, and of course the US more than others. I'm very, very relieved at the moment to see how few cases there are in Africa. The whole continent seems to be, suffering very lightly at the moment. But this is our opportunity to change things. So when we come out from the coronavirus pandemic, to rethink supply chains, to rethink the way that we produce locally, and we become food independent and water independent and resource independent as far as possible, and be more equitable in the distribution of limited resources, really has to be done. Mm-hmm. And I think it is an opportunity, isn't it?
But this is can be called strategic risk management.
Well, it's more than strategic. I mean, it's super strategic, isn't it? It's global. And the question with global risk management is, who is responsible? And so it can't be the United Nations, it can't be the World Health Organization or the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank. It has to be nations working together. We don't have that supranational structure. All of those other bodies have limited areas of competence or influence. And so how do we make, and the whole climate change debate is an example of that climate is global and it's not national. And so nations can take their own strategies, but how do we take a global strategic decision? And I don't think we have the mechanism for that. So that's the challenge, really. But it is kind of super strategic risk management. Mm-hmm. We have national risk management, and Spain is like the UK. We have a national risk register. But really, some of the risks on our national risk register depend on other people. The World Economic Forum has a global risks report, which comes out every year, which identifies some of these things, but management requires cross-national action and agreement.
Excellent. Victor Pascual, do you think there will be more risk analysis than before due to the coronavirus?
Well, I hope so. I fear it might not. After the year 2000, and we had the millennium bug, which was going to crash all the world's computer systems, we saw it coming 5, 6, 7 years beforehand. And we had a very active program of preparation and mitigation. And pretty much nothing happened. And afterwards, people said, well, that was a waste of time. Because we did all this risk management and nothing happened. Then we had the global financial crisis in 2008. And the banks have very developed risk management processes, the other financial institutions. They did all this risk management and it still happened. So we had two situations. In the year 2000, we did lots of risk management and nothing happened. In 2008, we did lots of risk management and it still went wrong. In Italy, when there was the earthquake in Aquila, the risk management experts in the government were arrested because they had not given the right advice. And people said, you should have known, you should have told us. And, it was a big scandal in the risk management community because they did say, but the action was not taken. So there's a lot of issues here. In terms of the coronavirus pandemic, we knew there would be a pandemic. We knew for certain. We didn't know when or how big or where it would start, but we knew it was going to happen. We've had previous evidence from, as we mentioned, the 1918 flu. We've had SARS. We've had MERS. We've had a pandemic in 1948. We knew it would happen again. There was a conference in September 2019, a United Nations conference, which identified pandemics as a global risk, needed this 7 action points not followed. So, we knew it was going to happen. The failure is in risk management action, not in risk analysis. And so I think the risk analysts, those of us who are risk professionals, the danger is we say, stop, do something different. And people just go, no. And they don't do anything. So you can't, of course, respond to every warning, but you need to be able to understand which are the key ones, and somehow it got missed. Now, after this particular crisis is over, I would hope we'll do risk management better and be listened to. But it's just possible that people will say, well, clearly risk management doesn't work, because if it had worked, this would never have happened. And it might be that there's a bit of a backlash. We'll see.
Okay, good one. And Emilia, I would like to ask to David, what do you think about planning now, especially we don't have visibility right now? What do you recommend?
So just repeat the question, Luis. Planning?
He says that what do you think about planning, especially right now where we don't have visibility? So do you recommend planning? You don't recommend planning right now because the plans in many cases are not going to happen.
Oh, okay. Yes, I do recommend planning, but there are two types of planning. There's planning what you want to do and planning what you might have to do. So we can plan our plan. We can say, this is my intention. So starting from here, I want to get to there. I take these steps, they get me there. But we also need to plan what happens if something is different along the way. And it's important that our planning includes resilience and flexibility. So we don't just have one plan that says, I start here, I finish there, these are the steps along the way. But we have checkpoints, gateways, we might call them, where we review progress and we say, now we need to replan. The single plan is useless. So we need to be replanning as we go along, but we also need a nothing works plan. And so resilience is important at the personal level. You know, if everything goes wrong for me personally, how will I survive mentally, emotionally, physically, financially? You know, what would happen if all of my family died, or if I lost my job, or if my pension disappeared? You know, how will I survive? Personal resilience. We need to have project level resilience. We need to have organizational, social, and national resilience. And we need to plan for resilience. And so a lot of what we call in our country, civil contingency planning or disaster planning for the nation, that's planning for the future that we hope will never happen. And so we need to do that as well, because the future that we hope will never happen might happen.
That's great. So thank you very much, David. So last question, which is, do you want to give any advice to the people that right now is listening to you?
People, oh gosh, yes, lots of advice. Do risk management, do it properly, do it well, do it early. It is the most important thing you can do. And so you need to be sold out on understanding what risks you're taking and being totally committed to finding them and managing them effectively so you can achieve your goals and be more successful. I think this is really, really important. And coming right back to the very first thing that I said when we were talking, Luis, even before the interview started, risk management is a life skill. It's a way of thinking. It's understanding that in order to make progress, we have to take risks, but we have to take the right risks and to take them safely with our eyes open. That risk can be managed through a few simple steps, a structured way of thinking about uncertainty that matters. We can stop the bad things and capture the good things and make life easier for ourselves and for everybody else. And so I would just put in a plea to see risk management not as a business competence, not as a project management knowledge area, but as a way of thinking in order to be proactive as we move forward in our lives and in our projects and our businesses, in order to make sure that we make the best of what we've got and we are more successful in doing the important things, important to us personally, to our organizations, to our countries and to our world. So risk management is too important to be left to the risk managers. We all have to do this. And I would really just encourage you to find a simple way of thinking about risk in the things you do and to then actually go and do it. It works, it's fun, it works in everything. So let's do it.
Okay, David, I'm gonna do it for sure.
Very good, thank you. I'm glad somebody will.
Yeah, sure. Many people, because the people in the audience is very happy. Gemma is telling you, thanks, Emil. So many people saying having so much fun. Okay, thanks, David. So people is really happy. Thank you very much indeed, David.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
And I would just say that there's lots of good resources out there. You know, obviously the Risk Doctor website has hundreds of papers. Everything is free. I'm giving everything away except for my books. All my papers are available in Spanish. So if you go to risk-doctor.com and under writing, you'll find all the articles. I have a Risk Doctor video YouTube channel, all one word, Risk Doctor video, 170 videos, all free, everything you want to know about risk management. Do please just use the resources. And it's all free. I just want you to take it and do it.
Could you repeat the URL for the people which is right now
Yes.
listening?
So it's www.risk-doctor, D-O-C-T-O-R, risk-doctor.com. And then on YouTube, it's one word, Risk Doctor Video. So it's all a single word, Risk Doctor Video. And you're very welcome to take whatever you find and use it.
Thank you very, very much for sharing all your knowledge with us. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
I hope to be back in Barcelona soon at LaSalle as well.
Yeah,
thank you for the opportunity.
Hopefully. So thank you very, very much.
Ciao. Okay. Bye-bye, everybody. Adios.
Bye-bye. Thank you.